everyone, and welcome to this very special interview with our national leader, Chris Cartwright. My name is Shirene, and I have the pleasure of being one of the pastors at Coventry Elim, and it's just a pleasure to sit down with you, Chris, and talk to you in a bit more detail. You know, we see you often up on a platform. People would have perhaps watched your talk at some point over this period, and it's great just to have the opportunity to sit down with you, get to know you a little bit better, talk to you about what this last year has been like and that sort of thing. So thank you so much for agreeing to this and for joining me for this session. So where I want to start is with the analogy that has been used so many times over the course of the last year, like we are all in the same storm but in different boats. I'm sure you've all heard that analogy used. Chris, could you tell us what the boat has been like for you and your wife Annie over this last year? What does it look like?
Sure. Thanks, Shireen. I think it's a great analogy, actually, because we are going through something together, but from very different perspectives. So for me, as you said, I'm the national leader of the Elim movement in the UK, and that brings with it very many responsibilities. Typically, pre-pandemic, I would have been working out of our base in Malvern, where we have our international offices, for usually about 3 days a week in the office, but then kind of travelling around Elim world. Every weekend I would have been in a different church, usually meeting with the church community and speaking, spending time with leaders. And it's just a wonderful part of the responsibilities I have and the opportunity I have. But then when we, back in March of 2020, when we very suddenly and dramatically went into that first lockdown, I guess that there were two things going on in my world. The first one was making sure that Elim, that nationally as a movement of churches, that we were going to be in the best shape to try and resource and serve our churches. I don't lead a local congregation. I'm not a part of that ministry team in a local church like you are at the moment, though I still am committed to the church in Cardiff where I live. But also then just thinking about the change to our rhythms to ensure that myself and my family and my wife and I would just really have the opportunity to go through the season awake, alive, alert to the things that were going on. So we live in Cardiff. We've been there for over 20 years since we went to Wales from London, and my children are now grown-up children. The youngest is in a final year at university in Liverpool and was back for periods when that was possible. And the other two, my older daughter and my son, are in Bristol and London respectively working. So it's been a typical family time of not seeing each other very much. Of really, my son's a teacher, primary teacher, been teaching most of the way through the various periods. And we've just really, gone through all of the stuff of distance from my mum's. My wife's mum is very poorly at the moment, is in hospital. And so there's been all of those challenges personally, but also really recognising that there is such a thing as an Elim family that are going through this season very much with a shared experience of fellowship and connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thanks for sharing that with us, Chris. And could you tell us, how have you kept yourself healthy as a leader over this last year? So, we've been allowed our hour-a-day walk initially and that sort of thing, but what are some of those ways that you've kept yourself healthy?
So I've tried really hard to use the extra time that we've all had at home pretty much, to just change some disciplines and to get some new rhythms in my life. So part of that has been trying to do some regular exercise. I did start with Joe Wicks back in spring of last year.
How long did you last?
Oh, well, I went for months, but I didn't do every day, and I cheated a bit. But I just found that really helpful, squeeze it in here and there, not always first thing in the morning. But physical exercise, doing lots of reading, and quite a bit of connecting. I mean, in the early days, connecting with our extended family on Zoom for quizzes was a very much a part of the Cartwright family experience. But then just noticing more and more that those things actually weren't just about a short burst, but it has been an opportunity just to try and reset. I've been using that word in the message recently. Some of our own personal rhythms and relationships as well. We've had to work at. We've been at home together so much, Annie and I, that we've really realised that we need to work at our relationship constantly, and that's been really precious actually.
Yeah, and things have changed so much, even in terms of family dynamics at home. Like you said, people spending significant more time together and that sort of thing, and it's really important to be intentional about those rhythms and those routines, which is really good. As you know, Chris, I'm a minister in training here in Coventry, and so I'm learning on the job. That's a very normal part of my role here, not to always know what I'm doing, not to always get it right, and to be trying to be better and to learn. And I guess in lots of ways, as a minister, as a national leader, you've been in training in some ways over the last year, because you've never led a church or a movement through a pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned, I guess, about yourself and about God during this period?
It's a great question, Shirene. I think that I would like to think that I've always been curious. I've always been committed to learning, not just academically, but I've tried to be a bit of a nosy Parker out there. I like to absorb lots of things. So that's been part of my journey. But I guess we've all been stretched beyond our expectations over this past period. I remember the early days of the pandemic hitting and beginning to move into lockdown, churches being affected. There was a time I felt quite guilty that I wasn't leading a local church, and part of all the activity of shifting things online and all the accelerated learning that was going on and for the average local church situation. However, in so many ways I can look back and see that I was having to go and do my homework on all kinds of things. But I want to say there's two things that are really important to me. The first one is that I believe in team. I really believe that we're better together. And I have a friend who's a great leadership coach, and some years ago he pointed out to me that team leaders are only really become really good if they've been good team players. And I think that's really cool. That's a great takeaway. So starting to be equipping people to be part of a team, and then maybe to develop some leadership skills in a team, and then to become leaders of teams, leaders of teams. That's been something that I've really valued over the past 12 months. If I'm honest, I can look at just so many illustrations where in our central teams, serving churches, from Malvern or in other parts of the UK, serving our churches on the ground, we've really had to lean on each other, depend on each other, and get some friends. If we didn't have them as friends before, we've had to find some new friends. One illustration would be, Todd Bolsinger, who was recently interviewed in our theological conference by Dave Newton. We used his book, Canoeing the Mountains, a few years ago, which seemed to be a great kind of picture for us of changing landscapes. And he was saying then, for the church, it's a whole new landscape now. We're going to have to learn new skills. Well, wow, don't we know that now? Yeah. And recently, re-looking at the book, got it off the shelves, dusted it down, and I found that he was talking about some things that I didn't hear first time round. One of them was competence, that sometimes we just have to get better at doing some things. And there's no doubt last year, as our church leaders were probably pulling their hair out about risk assessments and social distancing measures and what was permitted and what wasn't, and how do we keep our communities connected and growing together. That we've had to learn, and I want to commend every local church leader that's really just had to do some really heavy lifting, and it's been challenging and it felt inadequate, because we've all felt like that. But he goes on to say, actually, when we go through that time of increasing our competence, not the only thing, but it does give us greater credibility. And I would say, I can look back and see all kinds of things that Elim leaders have done in churches, working together, that our staff and team, I think of Olivia Ramate, who's led our operations, done an incredible job, of Sarah Bale and our finance team under Robert Miller, who've just been trying to serve. But a lot of that has been about learning more accelerated than ever and in the spotlight. But it does give us, I guess, I hope, credibility as leaders. And that means this: maybe some people will be more likely to go the next yard with us because of just how we've worked together over the past 1,000.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say, thank you and your national leadership team and, the kind of people that you've just mentioned there for the hard work that has gone in over the last year. At a local level, we've had emails and updates and information that has been disseminated down to us, partly because I know there's people that spend hours reading government guidelines that we really don't want to read, and just making it accessible and helping us in so many different ways, even resources that have been created and so on. And the national leadership team under your leadership have done a great job, and the department leads and everything. So a big thank you on behalf of us as Elim leaders.
Appreciate that.
The pandemic obviously has come with a lot of challenges. You don't need me to remind you of that. But I'm wondering if there are things that have come out of it that, it's also come with its pros, if you like, things that have been advantageous. And if there are things that have come out of it that you think have been particularly advantageous to any of our 4 priorities, for example.
I'm doing loads of thinking and praying around that, and I don't want to try and be too simplistic, because I think we have to be cautious and wary of that. But I think that local church, I had the headline, I picked it up from other people, local church is the hope of the world, and, but actually sometimes if we're really honest, that's quite worrying because we weren't all, we've not always felt that we were necessarily really fulfilling everything that God wants us to do in our communities and our cities and towns and contexts. But I really believe that. I believe the same things I believed pre-lockdown, but more so, that God really wants to use real people in real places in order to bring about change, but that it's actually important for us to recognise we haven't necessarily got this really fully right yet, and to come at that with that place of humility and almost like as beginners again. The day of the expert is gone, I think. Actually, many of us feel that there's a fresh kind of on-ramp for us to start again at many of the things, but also just that sense that God is still at work, and we can be so distracted, so easily distracted, and we can get so busy with good things, with important things, but in many ways this has been a time where I think the Lord is helping us to maybe leapfrog over a whole bunch of things that would have been in the way of change and progress and a simpler lifestyle of living out the mission of Jesus, and maybe filtering some other things out. So I'm really hopeful that those signs of life, like right now, a lot of people are seeing some fresh life in their communities. People coming to faith through Alpha, but also through other things. Some baptisms recently, that despite the circumstances almost, that people are still seeing almost a greater opportunity, appetite and opportunity for people to make steps towards Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. So I guess one of the keys over the last year, and another buzz term that's probably come up for people, is that adaptive leadership, the need to be flexible and to adapt. And you've talked about in your talk, in your celebration message, about this time of transition and reset. How important do you think that adaptive leadership model is going to be going forward?
Well, I think it's absolutely key. I find it a really helpful phrase, but I guess we'll all have different pictures. Does adaptive leadership mean moving small increments over a lot of years, or does it mean actually more dramatically a sudden, real jump, side swerve around? I think for me, in Christian life and ministry, there's so much variety out there. I mean, Elim isn't a franchise. We don't all look the same in our churches. They're not fashioned the same way. We don't have the same styles and maybe even microcultures. So there's huge diversity in terms of the types of churches, the way they worship. You know, Pentecostal, similar theology and doctrine and history, but different expressions. I don't think that we've been stuck in one groove. We've been quite adaptive in lots of ways. I guess that the challenge now is being more intentional about how we do that together for the sake of the mission of Jesus. And so that we do make sure that some of the things that are under pressure right now, like what local church life looks like week by week, and how we engage with people around us, those that are gathered already as part of the community of faith, and those that are outside, that we're going to be more flexible and major on the right things, but actually filter out a lot of stuff that was just kind of, not the real deal, not the real thing. Programs matter less than people. The way we've always done things, we're blindsided by that, and therefore I do think it's a time for great creativity. But I think the hope is the church has always been adaptive, certainly in our experience, and loads of local Elim churches would have their own stories that illustrate that. But I think there's just more of that to come. Yeah,
which is exciting
for us
as a movement. It really is. Yeah. So I just want to pick up on the areas of reset that you have spoken about. You talked about the need for a revelation reset, a mission reset, and a supernatural reset. So just picking up on that revelation reset, could you tell us a little bit about how God speaks to you? Like, how does he reveal things to you? Because it's different for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think God does speak to us in very many different ways. And I find two things happen. I love to learn, and I do love to study. So I hear things when I'm reading and studying, no doubt. But those are usually hints and little signposts. I find that I have to get time with God outside of the study in order to really get it. And that's been really important for me over the last 12 months or so. It hasn't come all at once, but there have been moments of just getting along with God. For me, all my life, I've loved to worship and to sing and to, and that's a real encounter place for me in terms of worship, in terms of pouring out my heart to God. But in those moments, more and more, the study side and the hearing hints and getting glimpses has come together with some real confirmation. So over the last few weeks, I was doing some work around our 4 priorities and trying to make sense of it for myself, because I keep saying this thing about making disciples, and it sounds so obvious, but I wasn't getting it. I kind of know it's the key to all the others, but in so many ways, I was struggling to really line that up and say, Lord, what are you saying to us? And yet more and more, I've just felt that summons to hear him as a son, and not just as a Christian leader on a platform or having to write something and put it out there. And so that's how it's a combination of those two things. But the real key to me has been finding that space and that place where I hear him as a son and not just as a worker.
Yeah, and I guess that's where those rhythms that you talked about earlier on come in and play such an important part, because it's not just about the study, but that regular rhythm of spending time alone with God, in the same way that Jesus did. He withdrew himself, didn't he, and spent time with the Father.
But maybe I could just say one more thing, which is actually the great part of your question is yes, about how we do, but then how do we share that in ways that can bring new followers of Jesus, or those that maybe have quite recently come to faith, into a deeper experience where they hear God. And I think, we've got a great opportunity as Pentecostals who believe that God speaks to us today through his word, but also through one another and also into our hearts and lives, to start that journey again of helping people to hear God for themselves, to be self-feeders of the word of God, not just to feed on the words they get from others, so into the Bible, into prayer, and into worship that becomes lifestyle for us. And that's part of that journey. So we're hearing together, but we're also hearing for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to pick up on like the mission reset, and you've touched on it a little bit in some of what you've said, but what do you think are some of the things that we can't go back to?
I don't think we can go back to just looking at the walls of our church and our local mission statement as the be all and end all, because God has a way of disrupting things. It's always about more than the local vision, but local vision is key. It's got to happen. We permission that local vision for a local community, but it has to be more than about just this moment. So I think God is wanting to increasingly, within Elim, for us to share that journey and encourage one another, but also with other brothers and sisters out there. We need one another. So the mission reset is about coming afresh, I think, to say, Lord, what do you want us to be responsible for in our community? Where do you want us to go? Where are we not that we're supposed to? And where are the gaps? And beyond, even if that's inconvenient or uncomfortable or we feel ill-equipped for it. And I know loads of local church teams are doing that. They're praying, they're seeking that. But I think it's just like, yes, more. Keep doing that and share it with others, because we're hearing some of the same things. So the mission reset, rooted locally, in us saying, Lord, what do you want us to do? Where do you want us to go? And I think gatekeeping leaders in local churches, pastors, leadership teams, I always want to nudge them, provoke them, maybe even push them into that next step of sharing that, of getting it outside of the board level meeting and beginning to say, guys, what does the Lord want us to be responsible for in our community? Where are the voices? Where is it? What's the cry? What's the whisper of the community? And how do we bring Jesus there?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Chris. I just want to wrap up with a little bit of a quick fire round. So obviously your answers have kind of been a little bit more in depth in the interview so far. So I'm just going to shoot some questions at you and hope that you just kind of give me the answer that pops into your mind straight away, if that's okay. So let's go for it. Your favourite Bible verse?
Is baptism promise that those who wait upon the Lord will renew their strength, or rise up on wings as eagles.
Fantastic. Favourite book of the Bible?
John, Gospel of John.
What are you listening to or reading right now?
So I'm reading an amazing book on leadership called Turn the Ship Around, about a submarine captain who changed one ship in the US Navy from being the worst performing to the best, and it's phenomenal. I'm loving it.
Fantastic. Traditional hymns or contemporary worship?
Ah, wow. Can't do. Okay, I'm going to go today, it'll change tomorrow, with traditional hymn. Here is Love Vast of the Ocean, we had in the celebration that I've been speaking in, and it's one of my favourite Welsh revival hymn.
Fantastic. Favourite colour?
Blue.
Favourite food?
Italian.
Okay. Favourite part of the UK?
Cornwall.
Favourite part of being our national leader?
Spending time with local church leaders and teams on the ground and just hearing their story.
What's the best piece of leadership advice you've ever been given?
Don't take yourself too seriously.
Great. One word that would describe the last 12 months?
Relentless.
And one word that would describe the next 12 months?
Hopeful.
Fantastic. Chris, thank you so much again on behalf of us as Elim leaders. We just thank you for your hard work, your faithfulness, how you serve so well with the support of Annie. The national leadership team are doing an amazing job just leading us and supporting us. The department heads, there's too many people to name, but they know who they are, you know who they are, and we really do appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us, folks. God bless you.